My research explores the history of political thought, and I'm interested in how intellectuals and activists throughout history have theorized democracy, freedom, and revolution, and I'm especially interested in perspectives from outside the West, such as from Asia and Vietnam, and from thinkers living under colonialism. Generally, colonialism is when a group of people settles in a foreign land and dominates the indigenous people in that territory, usually to exploit their resources and labor. And decolonization is the process of undoing all that. However, it's not at all clear what decolonization should look like, how it should happen, and what ideologies should guide it. My new book turns to Vietnam to show how colonized peoples have had very diverse, often conflicting visions of decolonization. My book is titled The Architects of Dignity, Vietnamese Visions of Decolonization. It introduces Vietnamese political thought to debates in political theory, showing how Vietnamese thinkers can challenge and enhance how we in the West think about politics. The Chinese colonized Vietnam for about 1,000 years. The French colonized Vietnam for about 100 years. The Japanese occupied Vietnam for about 5 years. The United States fought a war in Vietnam for about 20 years. How did the Vietnamese make sense of foreign domination? My book examines an intergenerational debate among 6 key Vietnamese thinkers, showing the different ways they responded to French colonial rule. For example, Phan Chu Trinh, who was born in 1872, argued that Vietnam was conquered because it was weak, because they had forgotten the teachings of Confucius, a Chinese philosopher. And he thought that an idea from Europe called democracy could actually enhance Confucian methods of self-improvement in Vietnam. However, a younger man named Nguyen An Ninh argued that the Vietnamese should turn to Indian and German great thinkers as role models in order to strengthen Vietnam's intellectual culture. They each had different ideas, but one thing that they shared was a conception of dignity that's different from how we think of dignity in the West. In the West, we think of dignity as something inherent in individuals, as a justification for rights, and as requiring social recognition. But these Vietnamese thinkers saw dignity as something first for the nation, not for individuals, as requiring the duty of assertion, and as not requiring recognition from French colonizers. These Vietnamese thinkers also offer us in the West a different conception of shame. Typically, when colonized peoples express shame, post-colonial theorists dismiss it as a kind of internalized inferiority or destructive colonial mentality. But these Vietnamese thinkers felt ashamed of themselves on their own terms and harnessed this emotion for productive anti-colonial purposes. To this day, Vietnamese national identity is shaped by colonialism and resistance to it. If you go to Vietnam today, you'll see streets and schools named after anti-colonial heroes. There's a huge mausoleum dedicated to Ho Chi Minh, known as the founder of modern Vietnam. And today, the Vietnamese Communist Party has a political ideology called Ho Chi Minh Thought, which all university students must study. In my book, I do not praise Ho Chi Minh as a good guy, and I don't condemn him as a villain. Instead, I explain how he understood decolonization and why that's interesting for political theorists. About 60% of the world's population lives in Asia, and Asians have been colonized by European powers such as the French, the British, the Spanish, the Dutch, the Americans, and also by other Asians such as the Chinese, the Japanese, and even the Vietnamese were colonizers as well. Therefore, much of Asian political thinking is in response to colonialism that they suffered under or that they did to others. So if you want to understand how more than half the world thinks, you need to appreciate the significant role of decolonization in the history of Asian political thought, and I think my book would be a good place to start. I'd like to invite you to a book launch event at SPOW 25 on October 28 at 8 p.m., where I will discuss my book with Yen Vu, a professor at Fulbright University, Vietnam.